Governance committees are facing mounting pressure as investors, regulators, and stakeholders demand more from boards than ever before, from board composition and succession planning to oversight of risk, culture, and sustainability. The governance committee has become one of the most strategically important committees in the boardroom. In this interview with Lori-Ann Beausoleil, lead director of CBOE Canada and Brookfield Income Trust Incorporated and director of Metro Incorporated, we explore how leading governance committees are adapting to a rapidly changing corporate landscape and what directors should be prioritizing now. So, Lori-Ann, how have recent market and regulatory dynamics changed the government committee's priorities?
Bill, I have to tell you, it's just sped everything up. I mean, before we used to have time, but now everything now is becoming fast because we have to be responsive to all of these, headwinds that we're facing. And we used to spend a lot of time on what I would say more compliance. And now, I mean, the risks are big. So we're forever looking not just at governance, and compliance, but now looking a lot at board composition. I mean,
Hmm.
I sit on a variety of different sectors, a stock exchange, publicly traded companies, a university. And that external market is compressing the time that we as governance committees can respond
Yeah.
to all of the things that we used to. And I'm telling you, speed does change how you operate, and it also changes what you need. But what I always say is the government governance committee, can no longer just simply kind of work at their own pace. They really have to understand what's happening in the market and make sure we're asking all the right questions. But the real issue for governance committees, at least from my perspective, is the shareholder and stakeholder expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, investigators, regulators, they want to see governance structures that are going to deliver. So you don't have time, as I said at the beginning, to think a lot about it. They're making sure this is not just a ticking box exercise and say, I've got my board and my board composition. They're putting pressure to ensure that we've got the right board asking the right questions with the right skills and competencies to deliver on the strategy. And that's not easy, Bill,
Yeah.
as you can imagine.
It's interesting because you mentioned board composition right there. What practices are governance committees using to strengthen board composition and succession planning as well?
Yeah. I'm always smiling because I just took over as governance and corporate responsibility chair for one of my boards, and I'm working hard.
Gonna say, uh-oh.
So it's the board skills matrix. I think what has happened is everybody will say we've got a skills matrix for publicly traded companies. We disclose such in our annual filings, what our board skills are. But guess what? It's no longer this annual process. It's a living document. As our strategy and risk change, sometimes the board composition has to change. We may not have the right competency. Great people at a particular point in time, but may not be the competency we need for the future. So, what I'm really trying to encourage on my boards is this isn't an annual exercise.
Yeah.
It's a regular. Is it quarterly? Perhaps not, depending on the organization and what's ahead. But if you really want to have the right people sitting in the seat to be able to address the actual strategic direction that we need, we can't wait for another year. So
Yeah.
sometimes we've got to make tough decisions, and that's hard. What's really hard, Bill, is to say, where are the gaps? We become a collective team, and there's certain teams that are good for certain types of environmental and types of risks and I'm going to call it headwinds. And then there's
Yeah.
some that are not. So the agility, the innovation. I mean, I don't. Well, we'll talk about AI, I'm sure, but so what I'm doing is it's not an annual exercise. We are maintaining an active pipeline, and we're really making sure that skills matrix is actually aligned to what we need to drive this organization forward.
Yeah.
And skills, and it's not just skills. I also talk about tenure. Yes, boards have, certain, not all boards, but some you will have board limits. But tenure does impact when you're in this new world of, I'm going to say, agility. And the
Yeah.
next thing is I also look at independence because, that is a hot topic. Sometimes you don't need a lot of industry experience, but then sometimes you do, and we're ebbing and flowing. So I'm going to say to you, when I say the board skills matrix, I'm looking at the skills, but I'm also looking at tenure, I'm looking at independence, sector experience, diversity, and I mean that truly by the definition of we need different experiences around the boardroom table. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say to you, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Definitely a lot that you have to juggle there, and you're finding
Yes.
that out as you sort of intimated earlier, right? And
Yes.
so you mentioned risk there as well. How is your committee integrating governance oversight with some of the broader corporate priorities, whether that be risk, culture, sustainability? What do you think?
Well, I think what's happened historically, those were kind of for other committees. If you know what I mean, specifically
Yeah,
risk, it kind of sat in audit, but now there's so much operational board composition, management, CEO. Governance is no longer separate from risk, it's integrated. Culture, now that is the hardest one. You can't
mm,
audit culture.
yeah,
Um, and governance committees have got to start asking those tough questions. First of all, I talked about board composition and skills, but also there are certain board behaviors and styles that model themselves better for a culture that's going to be more transparent than others. So, one of the tough questions, now that gut culture is so big, I mean, in Canada, our financial governance body, OSFI, is all over the criticality of culture. Because if you don't have transparency and you don't have a culture that feels the psychological safety to escalate and raise issues, you as a board are at risk. But you as
mm,
a board also have to have the right composition and communication skills to make sure management feels comfortable. Coming forward, we're going to work together. We're in the oversight business, but if we can't oversee if we don't know.
yeah,
So I'm going to tell you the hardest part now is that culture. And this concept of psychological safety is also becoming a hot topic because how do you ensure that the culture that you're overseeing allows people to feel comfortable? And
mm,
that's how do you do that without asking some of those tough questions and using other tools. So I would say that is definitely a new topic around the boardroom table and a very important topic, and one I'm going to tell you is getting a priority in all the boards that I'm on, because without it, the risk of failure is high.
yeah,
Sus-
absolutely.
Sustainability now is interesting. I've been so one of my the one that I chair, we're called the Governance Nominating Committee and Corporate Responsibility because we literally had to call out this sustainability requirement. It was kind of getting left. Yes, it
Yeah,
was on the board agenda, but we weren't having the conversations and at the committee level, the heavy lifting, if I can use that language. So, we've put it at a committee level, not just for reviewing the sustainability, but also making sure we're complying. And if you can imagine, it's not easy, especially in today's world, to ensure that you're complying because it's difficult now to get your suppliers to respond. So, sustainability to me is also paramount. Culture is kind of new but critical. Sustainability, we've got certain regs in Canada that we have to comply with around Forced Labor Act, but regardless, it's integrated into our agenda, our regular cadence of discussion, and not just an annual exercise. And risk, I am telling you, is probably the topic that everybody is talking about around the boardroom table. And we can't do it kind of in silos. I think we all own risk. I mean, the board owns the risk, but so do we in the governance committee. I mean, I'm also a CPA, so I
mm,
also, from a financial perspective, the financial risk definitely sits in audit, but governance has got to really start looking at those operational risks because they do impact strategy, they do impact performance, and guess what? They also impact on our HR looks after the CEO, but having
Yeah.
really good data and conversation around the CEO and CEO succession. So I'm going to say that it's integrated probably for the first time with the culture conversation, but risk, sustainability, and culture are on the agenda, and it's a regular conversation.
Interesting. And earlier on, you mentioned those two letters that everyone's talking about, AI. And so I wonder if that'll end up falling into the
Yep.
conversation we have here with our final question. But what emerging governance trends do you think will most shape government committee work in the next 3 to 5 years? We kind of used to talk about AI as that far off thing. Is it a
Yes.
little more recent now? Is that something that would come up?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but here's the challenge, and I hope I articulate this well. It's AI governance,
Yeah,
which just doesn't mean AI risk. It's not
yeah.
tactical, it's strategic. But the challenge is it's hard to be strategic if you don't have the technical literacy. So
Mm,
here is the challenge, and why it's such an emerging trend is we as board members are overseeing strategy. Part of that strategy is AI. And people talk about it very tactical. We're going to, use our bot to do this, that, or the other, take out headcount, save costs. That to me is tactical. What are we going to do strategically?
yeah.
And then how are we going to govern it? Because, there's all kinds of, as they say, hallucinations. But how are we as boards going to govern? And I'm going to tell you, Bill, this is one area that I actually, personally, because technology wasn't in my past as a partner at PwC, I was on consulting, but not on the technical side. I've had to upskill.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready to do that, then I don't think you deserve to be in the boardroom. And I'm saying that
Mm,
bluntly because we have to have the conversations around AI and not rely on a consultant to come in and tell us. Our fiduciary responsibility is we got to be able to provide that oversight. And what is that AI governance going to look like?
yeah.
So I'm going to tell you that it's really forced some of the boards that I'm on to really ramp up on the technology. On the first question around board composition, it is difficult, Bill, to find a technical person, but also at a governance level. We're
Yeah.
not there to do the programming. We're there to say strategically, are we doing all the right things? And then, Bill, we started talking about quantum computing. Now, for some, they go, well, the engineers and the physicists and all those people will take care of that. No, like we got to be having those conversations, not when it's in our face, but let's be proactive and start
Yeah.
those now. So I'm going to tell you the biggest emerging trend is AI governance, and I'm going to also add quantum computing. The
Mm,
next one, from my perspective, is the intensification of the regulatory requirements.
mm.
I've spent a lot of my career in regulatory compliance, and now it's not just on disclosure. I mean, the laws and regs are changing at a pace, and certain items take a long time.
Yeah.
We talk about even something as basic as privacy. Those regs are changing again. We thought we had the personal identifiable information, secure, et cetera. Now it's changing again. So, data
Mm,
sovereignty, what is going to be the compliance? Where's my data? Can I have my data as a US or Canadian filer, sitting in other jurisdictions? It's complicated. And I'm
yeah.
going to say that is keeping me up at night because
Mm,
you got to stay on pace and you got to stay up to date. So, got our governance, they got this crazy regulatory environment, culture, which I already talked about, because that is an emerging trend.
yeah.
And us, and globally, Australia has been the first to really come out with regs around culture. Specifically, they found that their version of workers' comp, worker safety, insurance boards, whatever it's called in your various jurisdictions, they found that they were going to be bankrupt because the types of cases now are different. If you break your arm at work, they know how long that's going to take to heal. When
Yeah.
it's a culture that's toxic and has caused mental illness, that's a different cost and time off, etc. So and then they attribute that to culture. So
Yeah.
Australia's got some crazy penalties. Canada has started off in one of our provinces, not with the penalties, just on the education, soon to come, kind of like that movies, coming soon.
Exactly.
And it's not easy because people say, well, I do employment engagement, but that's not enough on the culture and getting to the heart of toxicity. And then we've talked about sustainability. And I think the other thing that's really an emerging trend is just the conversations around the geopolitical risk.
Wow.
We've always had them, Bill, but now we're talking about them on the regular. And, look at the environment that we're having this conversation in.
That's right.
Things that we weren't anticipating, the impact on supply chain, the impact on cost and resilience, and on the labor force. So there's a lot going on in the boardrooms in 2026.